The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
What's going on, friends? It's Tuesday. It's Fantasy NBA Today. It is the debut of our half-size show Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is how we're going to streamline things the rest of the season, barring a large, monumental change, seismic shift in how things are going around here. We have Mondays, which is the reverse chronological lightning round. We've got Wednesdays, which is DFS day, so we can pack in a few segments. Fridays with Brew. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays is kind of like a little respite day. Now, we don't have a whole lot of time to mess around on today's podcast because there were 11 games on Monday night, and some big things did actually shift in how we're assessing the value of players, so I want to dig into that a little bit. But this is just, I don't want to call it a warning. It's not like a warning shot. It's nothing that anybody did wrong. I just think that at this time of the year, rather than having 5 hours of podcast a week to listen to, you'll have 4. This is valuable time. We're going to dive right into stuff. We don't have a whole lot of things to promote at Hoop Ball right now. When we do have our next sale, I'll certainly bring it up. We want you to keep playing in our DFS contests. I'll remind you of that as they open up. And one did, by the way. We have one tomorrow. We've got the room is open now, by the way. So we've got that DFS room available. I'll remind you again later in the podcast. But really, at this point, I want to jam through some of these shows as a little bit like my own iteration of a box score breakdown. We're also just kind of keeping tabs on things, and it's all about ROI this time of the year. I mentioned it repeatedly. It's not even a mention. It's harped. I harped on it on yesterday's podcast in particular. This is a time of year where you are hunting upside and statistical categories for yourself. And I'm feeling really good about the moves that I've made in that regard. I think that I've got a jump on people in my leagues, and I hope you can do likewise. Because I've already started to make ground to sort of pick up steam on various teams, and I don't think that they're aware that this is my strategic play. I've made so many freaking moves over the last 3 weeks since the trade deadline that I don't think anybody could have any clue what my actual plan is. I've picked up and dropped so many freaking guys. Anyway, this list will continue, by the way, as we go through some of the stuff that happened on the very large Monday card. But as I mentioned yesterday, one of the leagues that I like to talk to you guys about is one of the Roto leagues I'm in. And you could do it with basically any Roto league. You do your averages. You take your averages. And for me, the spot where I felt like I could make the simplest headway was assists. This is an 11-team league. I was only getting 4 points in assists. So you can go ahead and flip that thing best you can. 11th place gets 1. 10th place gets 2. 9th, 8th. See? There you go. Simple enough. I was in 8th place in assists. But I had the opportunity to climb from 8th place to 7th place with, at that time, only 1/100th of an assist per game played. Easy jump. Opportunity to get 2 spots climbed, 9/100ths of an assist. 3 spots in 14/100ths of a point, and 4 points in 15/100ths of a point. Then there's a big jump there. You go from 15 to 24/100ths if I actually wanted to climb the next one. I don't see that happening anytime soon. My only hope in that particular one is that the team that is averaging basically a quarter of an assist more per game played than mine, there's no chance that I would catch that team if that team made it to 900 games played. My only hope there is that that team doesn't make it to 900 games played, and maybe I could stay in front of them that way. So possible extra point, but doubtful. Still, very simple moves to make. A couple of minor adjustments. You start playing a few extra guards. You aim for assists. You try to play big men that are going to get you 2 assists per game instead of 1. It adds up. Trust me, people. You use your utility spots on a guy averaging 4 to 5 assists per game. All these little things. And then suddenly, you're up a 10th. You're up 2/10ths, whatever it happens to be. And you've added 4 points to your leisure. Now, you have to be careful in some of the other categories when you're doing this thing, but I know for mine, I can afford to lose a whole bunch of three-pointers. I've got a massive cushion in that one. There's sort of nobody on either side of me in points per game. Rebounds, I do have to be a little bit careful. There's one team right in front and one team right behind in that department, so I can't mess around a whole lot. Steals, I'm in fine shape. Not a whole lot to worry about in that regard. Blocks, there's really nobody behind me in blocks, but there's certainly someone right in front, so if possible, I'd love to grab a little headway there. But that's, again, what did I just list off to you? I think there were two categories where maybe I could gain 1 point apiece, or put my whole butt into assists and gain 4 points. That's a difference maker. Dan Besbris is my name. If I haven't said it on the podcast already, I already forgot if I did. At Dan Besbris on Twitter. Please rate and review the show if you have a moment. I would really appreciate it. We've been, as I've said before, kind of marooned at 180 reviews, which is a really good number considering the length of time of our existence. But I want more. I'm a greedy SOB. So please rate and review the podcast on whatever service you use. The podcast app on your Apple mobile device, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever it happens to be. If there's an opportunity for you to drop a nice review, we would certainly appreciate that. Monday. Big Monday. 11-game Monday card. And we learned some things. One thing we learned, Jake Layman, probably not trustworthy. Mo Harkless, when healthy, is trying to grab most of those minutes. Another thing we learned, Enes Kanter, there are going to be some quiet nights in there. And that'll happen when you're only playing 19 to 21 minutes per ball game. They yanked him out of this thing pretty quick. The second unit for Portland in the second half wasn't playing well. First unit for Portland in the second half wasn't playing well until late when Dame finally woke up a little bit. This was a McCollum night for most of the evening, however. But again, things are not going to be perfect when you're a bench guy playing 20 minutes. It's going to level off. We got some big games out of Kanter. There's going to be a couple quiet ones mixed in, but I think at the end of it, we're going to be all right. Kevin Love, 28 minutes. Wasn't that what I said on yesterday's podcast? I said, you know what? I may have gotten one game ahead of myself. I said, I think they'll probably play him 26 again in this one because then they have 2 days off, and then they'll crank him up to 28 in the next one. This is even better news. Kevin Love, 28 minutes, 18 and 12 on a poor shooting night. He's just going to roll. And I remain oddly confident that he's going to play a lot of their remaining games. I know that makes me sound like a careless optimist, but I really think that this is a thing. He's missed almost the entire season. I know that everybody's like, he's a shutdown risk because they're terrible and they're tanking. They tanked the whole year. He was on the shelf. They tanked. This is the time. This is like the beginning of the season for Love. He wants to get out there. He wants to play a little bit. So I don't think it'd be crazy to expect him to average 20 points a game the rest of the way. Maybe more. I think they probably sit him on some back-to-backs. They've got one on March 2nd and March 3rd. I think they have another one towards the end of the month, and they might have a total of 3 left if memory serves. But if he plays, all but 3 games post All-Star break, that would be a massive win. I think we can all agree on that. Cedi Osman's been playing better. I think having Love around probably helps him. Since coming back from injury, he's scored 13 on a minutes limit, 19, 11, and 27. He's knocked down 13 three-pointers in those games. He has a few assists. His rebounds are okay. He's not shooting terribly either. However, there's the big however, he's top 85 on 15, 5, and 4 with 4 three-pointers and 52% shooting. You're like, why on earth is that not a top 50 number? Well, he has no steals and no blocks until tonight. He finally put 1 steal into the pocketbook. So this is always going to be a problem for him. He's a guy where if you need threes and scoring and a smattering of boards and assists, that's the guy you're looking for. And so maybe that's a guy that fits the team I was talking about where I needed assists. He's vastly over-owned in most fantasy leagues, considering on the season, Osman's been a top 200 play. And even over the last month, including these good games, he's only been a top 130 guy because no defensive stats. Oddly, not that great of a foul shooter for a dude who has a pretty decent stroke overall. 75% on the year. That's not that great for a shooter. So, not that excited about him. A lot of these Cavs guys profile more as points league-y sort of guys. Osman had obviously a big ball game in this one, but I don't think you're going to be kicking yourself much in 9-cat, at least, if you missed out on him. The guy that's taken a hit here is Larry Nance. He's down to 28 minutes in this one. At 28 minutes, he can still be a solid fantasy contributor, but with Love playing now a full allotment, basically, all we can expect from him is 28 minutes. If he goes over that, that's freaking gravy. And Tristan Thompson might actually play again this year. I don't know why, but he might. I think you're holding Nance. I think you're rolling him out there until the wheels completely fall off, but he certainly has cooled off since Kevin Love became more of a thing again. Last 2 games in particular have been relatively quiet for him. I think he'll rev it back up. I just don't think you're ever going to have that stretch of 10, 11 rebounds a game that he was putting up when Love wasn't around. Hopefully that's relatively clear. Indiana lost in Detroit. The Pistons suddenly are actually playing reasonable basketball. I don't think we can just put it all on Wayne Ellington because he really hasn't been that big of a piece of it. But Detroit just blasted their way back into the 7 seed on the heels of an 8-2 run. Mostly they beat up on Kradinsky teams, a totally beleaguered Nuggets club, and then they beat like the Knicks twice, the Wizards, the Hawks, the Heat, the Mavs they beat in there. They lost to all the good teams they played. This is a very puffy portion of their calendar. But beating the Pacers is a good win for them. They've got the Spurs and then the Cavs. Spurs are not playing well lately. Then they've got the Raptors, Timberwolves, Timberwolves, Bulls twice, Nets, Heat, Lakers, Raptors again. They have a really easy schedule for the next 3 weeks. And then it gets really tough. Blazers, Warriors, Nuggets, Magic, Blazers again, Pacers twice, Thunder, Hornets, Grizzlies, Knicks. They finish up with two turds of basketball games. But this is the Pistons' opportunity to try to put a little cushion on themselves and guarantee themselves a playoff spot. And it's a lot of Andre Drummond, honestly. He's been insane lately. He's finally playing like the guy that everybody drafted. He's number 23 overall on the year now. Thanks to an exceptional run over the last couple of weeks, he's pushed himself from closer to 30 to closer to 20. He's been the number 3 fantasy player for a month because his free throws have been a little bit better. He's shooting 68% for the month. 22, 16, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. Remember, he did this for a stretch at the end of last year, and I think he, as a result, got a little bit overdrafted this season, but he's starting to do it again. He's a first-round guy over the last month. Kudos if you somehow bought low or just sat on him all year. Luke Kennard had a nice ball game. Blake Griffin triple-doubled, but went 3 of 8 at the free throw line and 6 out of 18 from the field, and that sort of killed that. And Wayne Ellington hit 4 3-pointers, which is, again, that's sort of what you bought him for. But he only played 25 minutes because Kennard got hot, and Bruce Brown apparently was playing well. I didn't watch it live. And they prevailed. This was in Miles Turner's return. He looked a little bit rusty. This is his first game after a very long layoff, but he still had a steal, a 3-pointer, and 3 block shots. He'll be fine. Thad Young's been so good since that slow start. Same with Darren Collison. Domantas Sabonis is playing well. Turned his ankle at the very end of this ball game. Wesley Matthews hit 4 3-pointers as well. And I'll give you credit, Wesley. You did it, and you did it better than Wayne Ellington did. It's looking more and more like neither one of these guys is going to be truly good enough to hold fantasy value. But at the moment, Wesley Matthews does have that slight edge. I think I'm probably punting on both, unless you desperately need threes. Draymond Green ended up playing, so he didn't miss any time with the ankle twist, and then he almost triple-doubled, 14, 8, and 10 with a steal and 3 blocks. Boogie had a big ball game. KD played well. Steph didn't really. He had one of his odd off-shooting evenings. For the Hornets, hello, Cody Zeller, 28 and 9, 3 steals, 3 blocks, and wait for it, this is really the number, 13 out of 14 shooting. Woof, that's a whopper for old Codenand Zeller III. He made both of his free throws as well. Just a huge ball game. This is going to level off. There's going to be a bad one mixed in there because he's not a top 50 kind of guy, and this is a top 25 sort of number. But he's a top 100 center. That's just sort of who he is. Nick Batum has been playing a lot better. By the way, was following some of those Hornets bloggers, and they did a really nice job of filling in some of the details on what's really going on with this team and why they started moving some bodies around. And basically what they've done now is they wanted to shift Batum to the point guard spot, where he's been far more effective and seemingly enjoying himself. Then they didn't want to play Jeremy Lamb at the 3 because he's a fairly spindly NBA player. So they start Miles Bridges at the 3, and then Lamb still saw a ton of time in this ball game. Jeremy Lamb played 31 minutes. He had 16, 5, and 7 with 4 steals and a block. He looked great in this thing. So whatever they're trying, it might work a little bit. I mean, they hung tough with a Warriors team that you're probably not going to win. And we'll see if that continues. But Miles Bridges does not have the fantasy stat set to support a pickup at this point. Hopefully you guys stuck with Jeremy Lamb, even with the benching and the one-off game. And it looks like Nick Batum may finally be worth using. I don't know how anyone could have possibly bought low. He's another guy that was way over-owned in fantasy leagues, given how bad he'd been prior to the last 4 ball games. He's been healthy. I guess there's that. D'Angelo Russell, 23, 7, and 8 for the Nets in a blowout win. Karis LeVert starting to show signs of life, 15, 5, and 7. Joe Harris at 5 more three-pointers. They're a fairly predictable bunch right now, at least until Dinwiddie gets back. Spurs have looked awful lately. Derek White, 7, 6, and 4 with 5 cash counters. He's a guy that is must-own for top 75 potential the rest of the way as his minutes ramp up and the enjoyment of his owners ramps up as well. Still bad games, though. I know the Lakers are making the most noise for just hideous losses out west. The Spurs are right behind them right now. Spurs are a game away from falling out of the playoffs, friends. The Kings are a game back of them. Clippers are now in front of San Antonio for the 7 seed. Spurs are 3-7 their last 10 games. That's the same as the Lakers. This is, by the way, the life of a Laker fan. Everyone's aware of how bad the Lakers are playing. Nobody gives the first flying you-know-what that the Spurs have been equally bad. But they're the Spurs, so it's just like, whatever, everything will be fine. And then this is bad, though. They lost in New York twice here. They lost to the Knicks. They lost to the Nets. Fine, the Nets are okay at the very least. But the Knicks? Yeesh. Spurs are a game away from falling out of the playoff picture. That's crazy. Timberwolves, by the way, who have quietly won 5 out of their last 10, are now tied with the Lakers, and they're only 3 games out of the playoff picture. Which, by the way, if you're a Robert Covington owner, which Dan raises his hand, I certainly am in at least one spot, you are desperately hoping the Wolves can hang tough. Phoenix, Miami. We were watching Tyler Johnson because he was the guy that I called a key pickup on Friday, and he played well. 18 points, 5 assists, a steal, a rebound, 3 3-pointers. The only thing I really wanted in this game out of him was more rebounds, but the Suns had only 39 as a team in this ball game. Not that many, by the way, is what that really means. So nobody really had a ton. Booker had 4. Rashawn Holmes actually played pretty well. He got 23 minutes in this game because DeAndre Ayton was getting pushed around a bit by Hassan Whiteside and got into foul trouble. And then Phoenix won. I mean, it's just like, I have to pause myself in the show. I'm not going to actually pause the show, but I'm going to pause my talking because this is the most clear-cut case of the reverse tank I think that I've ever seen. If Phoenix really wanted to tank, they'd have just left Ayton out there. And don't get me wrong, I actually like DeAndre Ayton. I think he's going to end up with a decent NBA career. I don't know about, first overall superstar, cat AD type of stuff, but he looks like he's going to be a solid center in the NBA. But in his rookie season right now, he has no clue what he's doing on defense. Rashawn Holmes does. 8 and 6 with a steal and a block on 3 out of 5 shooting. This is like the vintage Rashawn Holmes stuff. Just good percentages, no turnovers, some defensive stats. If only he could see 20-ish minutes on a nightly basis. But as I said before, he's not. They're forcing DeAndre Ayton into the mix as long as humanly possible. And they're losing, but they don't care. And that's fine. They should be trying to lose. That's the sort of circle that we're in at this point. Anyway, all of that to say, Mikal Bridges still played 33 minutes, 7 and 8, 2 steals. He missed his three-pointer, which would have really brought the whole thing together. Kelly Oubre's playing well. Devin Booker's playing well. Tyler Johnson's playing well. Ayton is worth owning. Basically, 4 of the 5 starters, not Josh Jackson. He's an awful 9-category guy. And then Bridges. Phoenix has 5 starters. Fantasy starters, I should say. For the Heat, Kelly Olynyk played 41 minutes in this game, but we also need to remember that James Johnson, Justice Winslow, and Derrick Jones Jr. were all out, so they were insanely thin at the power forward spot. Olynyk's going to get picked up in a lot of spots because of this ball game, and then Spoelstra is going to do something to just crush all of our spirits again. Hassan Whiteside, the world laughs at me with this one. I benched him 2 games back, and he's gone crazy. As soon as I put him back in my lineup, he's going to throw up a 1-for-6 free throw shooting game. So I'm just leaving him on the bench at this point. I've made a conscious decision to not let him tank my free throws, and so that's that. Bam Adebayo put up nice numbers as a result. The big guys had to do more because they were so thin in the front court. Goran Dragic is a guy worth watching. 22 minutes, 10 points, 4 assists. This is a lot better than his debut. And as I've mentioned before, if you need some scoring and assists from what will probably end up being like a top 115 kind of point guard, Dragic could potentially fill that need. And I think they'll ramp up his minutes as best he can handle them because he's better than the rest of these guys. He's not a traditional point guard, which they've long needed, but he sure is we'll say heck, because, family-friendly podcast. He sure as heck is better at running this team than Rodney McGruder when he was in there, Dion Waiters, the aging Dwayne Wade, Josh Richardson. He looks overmatched these days and exhausted. I hate the Heat, man. As soon as you pick any of these guys up, they're going to go right into the toilet. Derrick Jones Jr. is the guy I'm watching in the hopes that he can get healthy quickly from his illness and play 25 minutes because he could do the steals and blocks, and that's the kind of thing that the night-to-night fluctuations don't impact quite as much. If he gets his minutes, those things are going to be there. I don't think Hassan Whiteside is ever getting shut down. We've talked about this 1,000 times on the podcast. The world wants to blame all of the Heat's woes on Whiteside, and it's certainly not all his fault. They just aren't very good. The Heat are the opposite of the Portland Trail Blazers. What I mean by that is both of these teams could have suffered from stagnation syndrome, minimal changes to the roster in the offseason, and a lack of enthusiasm coming into the year. Portland was able to conquer that because, well, they just have better leadership on the floor. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic putting up a big year, all sort of fired that team up, and then they acquired some pieces here, so they're rocking. Meanwhile, the Heat have done nothing. Full stagnation syndrome out there. Nothing interesting. It's Dwayne Wade's farewell tour, end of an era. I mean, this is like wash it out to sea kind of stuff. They look terrible these days. The Heat might very well be tanking, by the way. They're now in 10th place in the East. They're only a game and a half out of a playoff spot. It's 7 games under 500, but they are far closer in my eye to the Wizards, Hawks, Bulls, Cavs, and Knicks than they are to teams like the Hornets, the Nets, the bottom of the actual playoff picture. Philadelphia able to cling to a 111-110 victory on the road in New Orleans. Boban hurt his knee. He's likely done for a while, it sounds like, which means Jonah Bolden is going to see a decent number of center minutes, and probably Ben Simmons center minutes, if I had to guess. Do we pick up Jonah Bolden for as long as Embiid is out? I honestly don't know that he can last on the floor without fouling out. But if he can get 25 minutes, he could give you some blocked shots. He's a streaming option at best. I'm probably not picking him up, but just thought I'd make mention of it, given he could be a streamer, and some of you are doing that right now. For the Pelicans, very nearly won this game. Anthony Davis played 21 minutes. He had 18 and 6 with 2 steals and 3 blocks. Elfrid Payton, 10 and 14. He's going to be putting up big numbers while they go to this junk ball. Julius Randle, likewise. Drew Holiday, likewise. And then what I said on yesterday's podcast really held true, which is that everybody else split minutes in an ugly and annoying fashion. Check Diallo, 17 and a half minutes. He made all 4 of his shots again. I don't know that this kid is ever going to miss another shot. But only 8 and 5 with 2 steals and a block. It's salvageable, but it's one reason for concern. Because when you're only playing 17 minutes and you have no established track record, it's hard to say definitively this guy's going to put up fantasy numbers the rest of the way. Frank Jackson, Stanley Johnson, Ian Clark, Kenrick Williams only got 26 minutes, and this is without Darius Miller. Jahlil Okafor, 17 minutes, and I'm totally fine with an Okafor drop, by the way. I don't think that those minutes are going to be safe for him. And I think you may want to consider moving along to somebody who's going to play. Atlanta, we're keeping one eye on everything going on out there. Kent Bazemore played 31 minutes again, but Taurean Prince was out in this one. I really want to know what the hell Kent Bazemore is going to do when the other wings are healthy. Kevin Huerter came back on a minutes limit. He played 23, so DeAndre Bembry also played 23. Trae Young had a huge ball game. John Collins played well. Dwayne Dedmon continues to excel for this team. They are the 3 safe bets. I don't like Kevin Huerter's game all that much. I know that puts me in the minority. I'm okay with that. And then I said on yesterday's podcast, I think you have to ride Kent Bazemore and just see how far it takes you. If his minutes do go away, when Prince comes back and Huerter gets his full minutes, fine, you drop him, but you don't want to be the one sitting on the sidelines if his minutes don't go away. Houston side, Kenneth Faried still got the start at power forward, even with James Harden back, but of course his minutes did come down a bit. Kenneth at 26, which is more than enough for him to get very late round value. He had 13 and 10 with 2 blocked shots. That's really what floated him. The Kenneth Faried of yore in 26 minutes is borderline. He's like a 12 and 9 guy in 26 minutes. And he might get you a blocked shot, generally, in that length of time. The blocks, the steals are not his forte. When he was playing 30-something minutes with Capella out, well, at that point, he was an obvious must-start because the field goal percent was a massive boon to your team. He was making like 7 out of 11 shots every night. That's a big deal. And he was getting 11, 12 rebounds a lot of the time. He was averaging 10, I think, over that stretch. And when you're on the floor for 30-something minutes, you just sort of fall into a steal and a block. 24, 25, 26 minutes, as you start to dial it down a little bit, it gets less juicy. I'm picking him up if I have a spot that I can create for him and if I need rebounds and field goal percent. But otherwise, I'm not super excited about it. Because his game is a little bit funky. It's an energy game, yes, but he's a tiny energy guy. He's not a normal size center. He's 6'7", I believe, and he's playing power forward center mostly just because he's a monster freak of a human being that can leap out of the gym, is very strong, but this is also why he doesn't block a ton of shots. But he got his 2 in this one. So again, I know that's what you're going to say. Hey, he blocked his 2 shots in this ball game. Let's not take that away from him. Obviously he gets a bump up, no question about that. If he's still starting and playing in the mid-20s instead of closer to 20 on the nose, he becomes a useful fantasy player, but don't expect top 75 from Kenneth Faried in 25 minutes. Expect more like top 110. I'd rather have Cody Zeller. I'd rather have Dwayne Dedmon, obviously. There's not even a question mark on that guy. So eventually we'll redo all of our lists and what have you. But again, I mean, even if you go later on tonight's card, the card that we're breaking down, I should say, the Monday night card, you're going to find a center that I'm more interested in just because of stat set. Elsewhere on the Houston side, PJ Tucker played well. Small forward, so his rebounds are going to come down. But I think he's going to be able to space the floor a little bit better. You may see some more three-pointers out of him. Eric Gordon is a field goal percent killer. Lakers lost in Memphis. I don't even need to take the time to put on my tinfoil hat, but I actually think the Lakers might be tanking. I know that sounds insane, and I think everybody's like, well, they have to make the playoffs or no one will want to come play out there. I think whoever wants to come and play out there doesn't really care if the Lakers make the playoffs this year. And frankly, as a Laker fan, I'd almost rather they didn't so that LeBron James can finally get a little bit of a rest season under his belt. Meanwhile, Brandon Ingram looks great. Kyle Kuzma's been playing great. Reggie Bullock looks like a perfect fit in L.A. JaVale McGee's getting his 20 minutes, so he's hanging on to value a little bit. The problem for this team is that they need Lonzo Ball badly because they can't guard anything. As evidenced by Mike Conley, 30 points. JV, 20 and 13 with a steal and 2 blocks. He's going to have a sweet finish to the year. Avery Bradley, 15, 6 and 3. Joakim Noah, 14, 12 and 4 in only 23 minutes. There's a lot of Joakim Noah questions. I mentioned it briefly on yesterday's podcast. I find it hard to believe that he could maintain decent fantasy value in 22, 23 minutes a game. If you want to take a shot at it, fine. I'm just not with you. I'm not saying there's no chance. I'm saying the probability is relatively low. And it's not that I feel like I'm going to take a loss or something on this, because I'm not saying don't ever pick him up. I'm just saying the odds would tell us that it will be hard for him. I also think that at some point this year, Jaren Jackson does play again, for whatever that's worth. So maybe you can ride it. You know, he's always been a good assisting center, but he's also a terrible shooter. And I'm worried that that's going to bite you a little bit. Certainly has a better chance at fantasy value than Ivan Rabb, though. Milwaukee, Chicago. Not much to break down from this ball game. No Chris Dunn, no Otto Porter. So a lot of Robin Lopez, who appears to be a must-own, must-start guy the rest of the year. Fine. Sacramento, Minnesota. Marvin Bagley into the starting lineup with 25 and 11. He looks like a go right now. A dude that seems to have fixed his free throw stroke halfway through the year. You don't see that very often. It's been better lately than it was early in the season, that's for sure. Into the mid-70s instead of the high 60s. Totally changes his fantasy appeal. For a while, he was points and rebounds and not much else, and not great free throw percentage. And now all of a sudden, it's points and rebounds and a free throw percent that doesn't kill you. And he's mixing some steals and blocks in. Congratulations if you saw that turn coming. I did not. I'm willing to admit that. You guys know how I feel about rookies for the most part. Rookie big men are usually the exceptions in that they have an opportunity to excel, and he looks like he's ready to roll. And Harrison Barnes looks terrible. Karl-Anthony Towns, after missing 2 games with a concussion, appears to be fine. 34, 21, and 5 with 2 blocks and 3 3-pointers. Welcome back. Tyus Jones is a terrific streaming option for as long as Jeff Teague is out. I don't know how long that's going to be. Teague's been missing time fairly regularly throughout the season, and I would give full-on thumbs up if you want to trot Tyus Jones out there. They play again on Wednesday and Thursday back-to-back, so you might even be able to squeeze 2 games out of it, and then they have 2 days off. So if I had to guess, I would say if Teague is not playing in Wednesday's game, then they're probably sitting him out until the 3rd, which is Sunday. So an opportunity maybe to get 2 would be my guess, games out of Tyus Jones, and that's not nothing if he puts up, like 10 and 10 with 2.5 steals in those games. That's a useful fantasy number. This is the time of year where you have to look at streaming guys a little bit. Derrick Rose scoring a lot of points, and that's it. And then the other name that I wanted to throw into the mix is Dwight Powell, who looks terrific as a starter for the Dallas Mavericks. And I don't know what it was exactly that turned things around for Dwight or for the Mavs. But again, you got to look at it's so strange. Maxi Kleber missed a game with an illness, and Dwight Powell played 30 minutes in that ball game. And he's been quietly the better of those 2 guys. You look at his minute log, even when Kleber was actually playing. 27, 28, 26, 25. Played 30 when Maxi was out. Maxi was back in this one, but came off the bench. And it seems like Dwight Powell was a better fit with the starting unit. And so when I look at these numbers, and everything with the Mavs, we're sort of figuring out on the fly, because this is not a team that looks like they're desperately trying to win basketball games. For Powell, in the 27 minutes that he's averaging on this stretch, he's been a fairly uninteresting fantasy player. Largely because he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games coming into this most recent one where he didn't have a single block or steal. And that just won't do. But over that stretch, he is shooting 50% from the field and 82% from the foul line. 12.5 points per game, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, mostly off the bench with the clunky second. I mean, this is a brutal second unit with no J.J. Barea. Brutal. Then, throw him into the starting mix, and everything changes. He didn't start, by the way, in their last ball game. He came off the bench behind Salah Medri, but he did end up playing a decent amount with the starters, and he had a decent ball game, 12, 6, and 5. Again, a lack of defensive stats. Getting him in there here with Luka Doncic, maybe that's playing a role in it. Someone that can actually distribute the basketball a little bit. This has the ability to change the kind of shots he's getting. Easy looks, right around the basket, dunks, layups, open three-pointers, believe it or not. He made a couple of those in this ball game. Some steals, some blocks, as they can get out and run and get a little tempo. So, as we look at some of the centers, he's a guy with okay center upside if the steals and blocks can exist. We have reason to believe that the steals should. Over his career, he's averaging 0.6 steals a game in about 17 minutes. So if he gets that up around 28, that turns into over a steal a game and not much below a steal a game or a block a game as well. So he could almost be like a 1-and-1 steals and blocks guy on, hopefully, and this is our goal with this, like 13 to 14 points and 6 to 7 rebounds. And that becomes a really nice backup center, a la the Cody Zeller build. If you could have two Cody Zellers, two Codys are better than one. So he's an interesting center. I think you're looking at a guy with, top 110 kind of floor as a starter, top 90 upside. Not going to get much beyond that unless suddenly steals and blocks start rolling in, but I don't think they will. If I'm picking between Dwight Powell and Kenneth Faried, I'd probably give an ever so slight lean to Powell because of the free throw shooting. But I do think that they both profile pretty similarly, with Faried better on the glass, Powell, again, better with the foul shooting, and then neither one of them is a massive steals and blocks guy. But the centers are out there, man. This is an interesting time of year to be grasping at those dudes. Powell's another one. Maxi Kleber actually played better off the bench in this ball game. He managed to start blocking some shots and hitting some three-pointers again, but just not enough minutes for it to be truly relevant. For the Clippers, Patrick Beverley finally made some shots. Not a ton of them, but enough to put a dent into this thing. He hit some three-pointers. He got his rebounds, assists. He looks solid. The guy that I said I think we can trust, Montrez, Gallo, Lou Williams, that's about it. Ivica Zubac's not so much. And then there's just sort of too many bodies with this Clippers team. And that's your massive Monday. I mean, there was almost something in every single ball game. Luckily, short Tuesday, Orlando, New York. It's mostly Mitchell Robinson, if DeAndre Jordan is playing or not. Mitchell Robinson still locked in as a wonderful fantasy guy. I'm seeing Damian Dotson getting picked up a lot, but he profiles more as a points leaguer. Toronto, we're watching Marc Gasol in that second game of the evening. He's a starter now, it seems, and so the minutes are trending up. That's a really good sign. Oklahoma City, nothing. Denver, not much. A lot of timeshares going on with the Nuggies these days, and that's about it. So really easy Tuesday night, makes for a much simpler and shorter pod, and we'll just wrap it up here by requesting once again that you take a moment to rate and review the podcast. And please, hop on into our DFS contest these days. We've stagnated. We're suffering from Miami Heat-itis, where we're just have like the same 95 guys in the contest every week. Come on, let's get some fresh blood in there. You can make fun of me too, because all I do is lose. I am Dan Besbris. This is Fantasy NBA Today. We'll talk to Micah Patria tomorrow to get us ready for the DFS contest on Wednesday. Thursday will once again be a half-unit pod. And then Friday, we'll wrap the week up with Brew. Big pickups all week long. I'll keep tweeting about it at Dan Besbris if you want all my updates as they bang into the sides of my head. I will bring them to you. And of course, tonight we'll be recording a real Big 3 episode with Bogman and Jonas Nader. That should be a lot of fun as well. Have a lovely Tuesday, everyone. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.